Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister update the House on how the Marshall Liberal government is creating jobs right across South Australia, including in the regions, through the move of Year 7 to high school?
The Minister for Education.
I thank the member for the question, and it's a very important question, and it's a good day to be asking it, sir, because today teachers right across South Australia, whether new graduates or indeed people on contracts, whether people who are primary school teachers interested in a change of scenery, or indeed people from other sectors interested in working in public education, can now apply for one of the 1,000 or so new jobs in secondary schools available next year. Indeed, there is an increase as a result of Year 7 going into high school of about 800 jobs, teaching jobs in the secondary system, and then a couple hundred more, of course, as a result of the increased numbers coming into secondary schools and, of course, natural attrition as well. But 1,000 opportunities for people to get jobs as teachers in our secondary schools around South Australia. It's a net increase of several hundred, at least 300 extra based on the previous year compared to the increase in high schools as against the fewer teachers required in our primary schools with the Year 7s moving into high school. But the great news for primary school teachers around South Australia, sir, is I'm very pleased to advise the House and the community that there has indeed been such enthusiasm from our primary school teachers in South Australia to change their skills, to change their scenery, that indeed we've already had 100 primary school teachers locked in as moving into high schools next year, and indeed we anticipate the interest of hundreds more based on what we've already heard. Some of the feedback I've had from primary school teachers keen on making the change has been that they have had a passion for a subject area, whether it be history or mathematics or English or art or drama, and indeed teachers in all those fields are among those that I've spoken to at schools like Wirianda and John Pirie and indeed Mitcham Girls, where these schools have already made the change, and other schools where teachers have already been identified. They now get the opportunity to teach that as a subject specialist teacher in a move to high school. And often these are teachers who have enjoyed their time as a generalist teacher in primary school, but when they think back to when they were studying, they had a passion for a subject area that they can now exploit as part of the next stage of their career. So those who were taken on last year, the 100 primary school teachers who are locked in, are already planning their professional development, and as of today, teachers can now apply for those extra hundreds and hundreds of roles next year. In addition to that, of course, given that we're opening 4 new schools, the Aldinga Bayindi College, the Riverbanks Arta 12, the Goolwa Secondary College, and indeed the Whyalla Secondary College are also all recruiting, and primary school teachers are being recruited right now at those 2 Arta 12 schools in Aldinga and Angle Vale, as they are on the APY lands. Further primary school vacancies will be advertised in Term 3. So 1,000 jobs in our secondary schools is great news, but it's particularly not just great news for teachers, it's great news for the students, because it heralds that from the beginning of next year, our Year 7 students in South Australia will finally be in a secondary setting as is designed and anticipated in the national curriculum to which we're signed up, where specialist settings are designed for specialist subject teachers to teach the curriculum in the way that it is done in every other state, in every other territory, in every other sector, the Catholic sector, the independent sector here in South Australia. And that's great news for our students, because we want them to be on a pathway to success as much as we can. It's complemented, of course, by the infrastructure work that's underway right around South Australia. From Renmark to Roxby, from Mount Gambier to Port Lincoln, there are upgrades at more than 100 schools that are going to be happening, more than 70 of those underway, and a significant amount of that will indeed be completed by the end of this year. And indeed, we are very excited about the opportunities for our Year 7s going forward as Year 7s start in high school from Term 1 2022.
The member for Wright.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker, to the Education Minister. I refer to the Minister's last answer. Can the Minister confirm that the government has so far recruited only 100 of the 1,000 or so teachers that are needed for the transition of Year 7 into high school?
The Minister for Education.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question from the member for Wright. I confirmed that we sought to get 100 spots filled last year that were guaranteed spots for primary school teachers who currently have permanency within the South Australian public school system to move into secondary schools. And indeed, I was at Banksia Park High School with the member for Newland this morning, where they've got 4 of those teachers. Very excited about them. Now, those are teachers that were locked in last year on, according to the timeline that we said, it was a maximum of 100. The principal at Banksia Park International High School, Rolly Coulter, told the media that those 4 places were indeed very hotly contested. There were a lot more interested primary school teachers in moving into high school in that round last year when we made 100 spots available, and I would fully anticipate that many of those teachers will now apply through this round. It was a timeline that was worked through in consultation with the union and other representatives, and so according to that agreed timeline, 100 spots were made available immediately last year for those primary school permanent teachers to move up. Then the next group of teachers that were placed were those that have placement rights and indeed those who were potentially filling temporary positions, and that's another in excess of a further 100 that have been placed during term 1 this year, and they've been indeed welcomed by their principals. The mechanism for those placements might be familiar to the member for Wright and the member for Port Adelaide, having been or having worked in ministerial offices, but it will be a little bit unfamiliar to many outside of education. With placement rights, these are teachers who have an industrial right to be working in the department, but whose position within a school may not necessarily be confirmed. And it's long been a challenging issue for the department because, of course, demographics in schools go up and down, and indeed sometimes there is a stigma attached to these placement rights, which is in many cases deeply unfair, but nevertheless these are experienced teachers, quality teachers. Now, we put into place a process where these teachers were able to provide a video talking about the things that they are passionate about, the sorts of subjects they'd be really interested in teaching about, to which would speed up the process whereby principals would be able to get a glimpse of the passion these teachers would have in being able to take on these teachers. So rather than these place teachers getting a job and confirmation of where they'd be the following year in term 4 or sometimes during the summer holidays, those place teachers now have certainty going into term 2 of where they're going to be next year, which has been extraordinarily welcomed by both the teachers and indeed the principals who have placed them. So now that was the second group. So we've got more than 200 of those teachers locked in between the primary school permanent teachers locking in their places and indeed the place teachers. The next round of advertising, as agreed by the process that was done in consultation with all appropriate industrial representatives, is that it is now an open call. So schools around South Australia in term 2 are advertising for positions next year. Now, I'm sure the member for Port Adelaide would recall the challenges that were often put, and these were certainly not new challenges for her, as there's a long-standing challenge in an education system with 500 public schools and demographics going up and down. The member for Wright may remember it as well from his previous role. That going into the beginning of a school year, sometimes there were still positions to be filled. Sometimes there were still positions that had been held over and placement right teachers to be placed. We're in term 2. We have 3 terms before term 1 next year when these teachers need to be in place, and we are so far ahead of schedule for placing next year's teachers, despite the extraordinary complexity of Year 7 being moved into high school, that I couldn't be happier with the way the Education Department is being able to deliver this. I look forward to the remainder of those positions being placed. I'm confident they will be. There is such enthusiasm from new teachers, graduates, primary teachers looking for a change, or indeed contract teachers looking for permanency. I have every confidence we will fill these roles and fill them with people who are very well suited to the roles they're going to fill.
Fantastic.
The member for Wright.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is again to the Minister for Education. Can the Minister advise how many of the 5,024 teachers currently on contract in the state's schools could lose their jobs because of the Year 7 recruitment program?
The Minister for Education.
Thank you, member, for the question. It's an interesting question because, of course, we are now providing more opportunities for permanency than have been introduced in any single year as that I'm aware of. There may well have been a drive at some point in the previous government, but I'm not aware of a time when the previous government took on such a net increase within 1 year. And, of course, I remember when we put into the 2018 budget that the ongoing cost of Year 7 going into high school would include what was then estimated at $40 million a year because because of the costs of the extra teachers that would be put into high schools, because you have more teachers per students in high school than in a primary school. The Labor Party at the time described it as 40 million more reasons to oppose moving Year 7 into high school, because they opposed, one can only presume, spending $40 million extra on more teachers in our public schools, which struck me as odd, I've got to say. Now, this side of the House has been arguing for Year 7 to go into high school for many years, for a number of reasons. Not just because it fits in with other states, the national curriculum, but we believe that our Year 7s are ready. They're a year older than they were previously. When I was in school, the age at which Year 7s are now were indeed in Year 8 and in high school. We believe that they're emotionally mature, and that's, of course, been the experience in every other state and in our pilot schools and in the other sectors and in the R-12 schools and area schools that already have it. The children are ready, the students are ready, they are going to be served well. Now, in relation to the teachers on contracts, I think I've said in both of my answers today, this is an extraordinarily good opportunity for teachers who are on contract, who are concerned about where that contract going year to year to year. It makes it harder to get a loan for a house when you're not confident of your employment going forward. It makes it insecure. We're providing wonderful opportunities for permanent jobs in education. We're going to have more teachers. We're going to have increased government spending on teachers in education. This is actually not just in isolation of Year 7. When we signed the National Schools Funding Reform Agreement a couple of years ago, that also required extra investment, not just by the Commonwealth, of billions of dollars into our state public schools, but an extra $700 million over 10 years by our state government as well. And that's going into more teachers, more investment for school, more support services for school, a dramatic uplift in the order of tens of millions of dollars in support for students with disability, which has provided jobs not just for teachers but also for expert SSOs and other support services staff. Now, in relation to the contract teachers within primary schools, there is two opportunities that are coming. The first is the one that is open today. Many of those teachers are able to apply for the 1,000 jobs that are going to be increasing in our secondary schools next year, and what we have heard is that hundreds of them are keen on doing so. The second group, of course, where there is an opportunity is that depending on how many permanent primary school teachers apply for these jobs in secondary schools, and we know that there's 100 already locked in, and we expect there's probably going to be quite a few more, potentially dozens, potentially hundreds more, through this current round of calls. What is entirely possible is that there will be new permanent positions available in primary schools going forward as well. That's why we're doing the high school contracts now, the high school call now, and indeed the primary school calls will be happening in term 3. So we have a solid understanding of how many teachers are moving from primary school to high school, and that will be a great opportunity for many. There are, as I said previously, some opportunities right now. The Aldinga Byendi College and indeed the Riverbanks College up in Angle Vale are recruiting primary school teachers right now, as are schools on the APY lands. And so primary school teachers interested in that permanency of position have some opportunities now, and they'll have more opportunities in term 3.
Honourable Dixon.